When Black Bolt thought that the world was going to end, he sold his son to Kang the Conqueror, a man who can travel through time. But since the world didn't end and Secret Wars ended and they have survived, it's time to get his son back. Welcome to the Complete Story Series, where I take trade paperbacks and single issues and I break them down into digestible bites to help you understand. Then I read it dramatically back to you. All alterations of the panels, text, and images are to prevent copyright problems, and all art is owned by its respective companies. Our story begins with Black Bolt, Triton, and Reader with his dog Foray, stepping through a time portal to visit Attilan, the birthplace of the Inhumans, 13,000 years in the past. Triton tells Reader to keep an eye on the portal while him and Black Bolt go on ahead. But before they could leave, a blue light appears to surround the three of them. As Reader asks Triton what's going on, an image of Kang the Conqueror appears before them, telling Black Bolt, "We made a deal, but you decided to break that deal." As the light begins to fade, the group finds themselves in 1961, and Kang tells them that all of those who follow Black Bolt in his attempt to steal his property will die. Reader tells him, "Wait, I was only hired, but where are we anyway?" Kang tells him that this is the place where the SAR bomb, the largest hydrogen bomb ever, was dropped, and it will be within the next 2 minutes. He's moved them through time to their own deaths. Kang then looks at Black Bolt. "We had a deal. I would take your son as if the world was ending to save him, and if the world was saved, he would still belong to Kang." Reader says that this isn't the job, and Triton tells him Black Bolt is trying to get his son back so that he can continue his line. But Reader asks, "What about my line?" As the three look out, they see more giant blue orbs, and as they begin to fade, soldiers and dinosaurs begin to appear around them, charging at them. In the present time, Queen Medusa, along with the Inhumans, finishes defeating the Chitauri warriors and begins to head back to New Attilan. Once they get home, Iso, one of the Inhumans, goes off to see their guest, Hank McCoy. Medusa then follows Iso, and once they get to Hank's lab, and Hank tells her that it's kind of hard to do his research when Medusa keeps taking his assistant, Iso. Hank's been working on something that can help both Inhumans and mutants, but Medusa fears that if the mutants come into open conflict with the Inhumans again, one of the species will end. Hank agrees and tells her that this work does take time, but before Hank can finish his sentence, Medusa begins to leave and tells him, "Please, just find a way." Back in 1961, the SAR bomb begins to fall, while Black Bolt, Triton, and Reader all fight off the soldiers and the dinosaurs. Triton tells Reader that they need to get back to the portal to get back to Attilan. So Reader makes another portal, and while Reader calls for his dog, Black Bolt tackles Reader through before a T-Rex can eat him. The bomb drops and everyone rushes into the portal back to the present, where Reader asks where Foray is. Triton tells him to try and be calm, but that's when Foray jumps on Reader, licking his face, and Reader tells him that that better not be Triton. Triton tells Black Bolt that this plan went rather poorly, but Kang will know that they escaped. It doesn't matter though, Triton will follow Black Bolt to rescue his son. Triton just has no idea as to how they're going to do that. Back at the present-day Attilan, Medusa goes to meet the liaison between the Inhumans and New York, which happens to be Johnny Storm, who's also her new boyfriend. As the two of them begin to kiss, Johnny's about to say something when he looks behind Medusa and he sees a rather displeased Black Bolt. Johnny tries to tell him that he knows that she's his wife, well, was his wife, but he would not intentionally do what he just did in front of him. This really isn't what it looks like, Black Bolt. But Medusa tells him that she doesn't want to cause him any pain, but this is exactly what it looks like. Johnny begins to cover himself up in flame, but Medusa tells him that he needs to calm down. But Johnny tells Medusa that her ex-boyfriend, that with a single word could kill a person, matter of fact, destroy an entire planet, just walked in on her and her new boyfriend making out. Why don't you tell him to calm down, as Johnny looks over at Black Bolt, who is currently showing further signs of displeasure. And Johnny walks up to him, please calm down? Medusa tells Black Bolt that her and Johnny's relationship started after they separated, but that doesn't matter. Did he find their son? Black Bolt just places his hand on her shoulder and stares at her. Medusa tells them both to come. She's calling the council. As Johnny begins to follow Medusa, Black Bolt begins to follow behind, but he stops Johnny. He then points at Medusa and then himself, and he reaches for one of the candles and he puts it out. Black Bolt then continues to walk off, and Johnny thinks to himself, well, that was pretty clear. In Mesopotamia, 924 BCE, Kang stands in an old temple with Black Bolt's son, Ahura. Ahura tells him that he will not fail, and Kang tells him, good, go forth and conquer. Back in the War Council room, all of the Inhumans along with Hank and Johnny begin to gather. Medusa asks Triton to speak for Black Bolt, so Triton explains that they were going back in time to rescue Black Bolt and Medusa's son from Kang, and that's when Medusa stops him. Wait, I could not have heard that correctly. Black Bolt made a deal with Kang involving our son? Reader tries to state that as he understood it, Black Bolt had to do this to save their son's life. But as Johnny tells Reader it's probably best to not get in the middle of a family affair, the man in front of them, Gorgon, disappears. Hank noticed what happened, and when Iso asks what's wrong, he tells her that there's no time, and he hits a button on his wrist. A red force field surrounds everyone in the room, and Triton asks if this is some sort of mutant trick. Hank tells him no, didn't they see Gorgon vanish? But Medusa looks at him and asks, what does he mean? Who's Gorgon? Medusa then goes on to ask Hank to explain himself, and Hank begins to explain that it looks like Kang is attacking the Inhuman timelines. Iso begins to look outside of the bubble to see that some of the guards are starting to disappear too, and Hank continues to state that he has seen this before, so he came up with a countermeasure so that everyone within this bubble is in their own timeline, shielded from them disappearing. Black Bolt then points to Reader's belt, but Reader tells him they don't know where or when they need to go to stop this. Hank mentions that it's possible to try and go back and stop Kang, but he doesn't know enough about the Inhumans' history. And Iso tells everyone that they can do it with the use of the Inhuman Codex, as well as the Historian, but it's out there, outside of the time bubble. Johnny tells them not to worry, he's not an Inhuman, so Kang wouldn't be targeting him as he was trying to get everyone else. So Medusa says that she will call 2 other Inhumans to get the items ready for him. Johnny leaves and grabs Inferno and Grid, who have the Codex and Historican, and starts to fly back. Once Johnny arrives with the items, Medusa asks, where are Inferno and Grid? And Johnny looks at her saying, who? Iso and Hank quickly begin to work with the device, but as they work, the building they were in vanishes. Their entire history is going away. And Reader asks if someone can tell him what's going on, and Triton tells him that Nuatilian is gone. Iso and Hank finish their preparations, and Reader teleports them all back to the timeline to find Kang. But when they get there, they see nothing. Black Bolt and Johnny head off to find Kang, and once they do, Johnny asks what he's going to do as phantoms begin to appear around him. And Kang tells them, at last you have arrived! He begins to take off his mask, telling Black Bolt and Johnny that he's been waiting for far too long. And when he finally finishes taking off his mask, he reveals himself to be Ahura. Black Bolt's son is the current Kang. Ahura tells everyone that he was just expecting Black Bolt, but it's good to see his mother Medusa could make it out as well. Medusa tells him, please, let's just talk about this. Ahura tells him that it's been 190 years since he last heard her voice, and he remembers the lullabies that she would sing, and that this was before, they abandoned him with Kang. There will be no more lullabies, just drums of war. He used to dream about hearing her voice, but those dreams are now just dust. Johnny tells Medusa to get back, he'll take care of this, but Black Bolt stops him. And Johnny states that he understands. He still has his son. All of the Phantoms form a line and they begin to pull out bow and arrows. This is Ahura's power. He's able to create Phantoms to do things for him. And Iso tells Hank and Reader to get back. She will shield them. But as the Phantoms begin to fire, some of the arrows pierce through Iso's shield. Iso tells him that she doesn't understand. The air pressure should have stopped those arrows. But Hank pulls an arrow out of his leg and tells her that these arrows are a psychic projection. So the shield would not have worked. But out of 100 arrows, 5 did get through and 1 has hit him. Reader stands in front of them and readies himself. He can't use another reading on sight, so he can't see what he's doing. So he's just gonna have to take down anything that gets close, no matter what happens. Don't let them touch my dog, he tells them. Medusa and Triton ready themselves as the Phantoms begin to charge in, but before they can get to them, Black Bolt releases a blast, destroying them. Medusa then looks back at Black Bolt and asks, wait, you left Ahura to Johnny? Johnny begins to fight with Ahura, but Ahura deflects all of his attacks. Ahura then tells Johnny that he's lucky to have any affection from his mother anymore. He's seen what he's going to do to her, and if he did, he would already be dead. Ahura then goes on to tell him not to worry. It's like Kang always said, it's just a matter of time, and he blasts Johnny with his beam. Johnny begins to fall, and Ahura flies over to him, holding him by the neck, and a Phantom comes out of Ahura and into Johnny. As everyone continues to fight the Phantoms, Johnny appears before them as a giant light, and he fires down on everyone. Black Bolt quickly turns and he begins to yell back, the one thing he shouldn't do, and the force of his speaking stops the blast and stops Johnny. Both Johnny and Ahura begin to fall from the sky and Medusa catches Johnny with her hair, while the Phantoms catch Ahura. Reader asks what the hell was that sound? It sounded like a nuke went off, and Hank tells him that you now have the privilege of having heard the voice of Black Bolt. Huh? Who was the poor bastard at the receiving end? Johnny Storm, actually. Well, I can't say I didn't see that coming. Ahura begins to regroup as Black Bolt's voice has destroyed the link between Johnny and Ahura, and then Reader makes a castle for everyone to defend themselves in. After some time, Ahura calls out the Black Bolt and Medusa, telling them to come out. It's time that they talked. As Black Bolt and Medusa walk towards Ahura, Medusa asks, just what did Kang do to you? And Ahura tells him that Kang raised him for war. He knew what Kang was doing and he did it willingly. So when he was done erasing the Inhuman timeline, he killed Kang and he took his time technology. He then goes on to tell them, look what Kang made me, what Black Bolt allowed to happen. I am now the conqueror. and I have worlds to destroy. And Ahura looks down and he asks Black Bolt and Medusa, what do you see? And as Black Bolt and Medusa hold hands, Black Bolt whispers, my son. Just then, Ahura is blasted by Black Bolt's voice, and Medusa goes back into the castle telling everyone to come outside. They need to save him. Back in the lost city of Attilan, 13,000 years ago, Kang appears and he brings a cocoon of an evolving Inhuman. Kang tells the men around to get their king, Randak. And as Randak comes out, he begins to look at the cocoon, and Kang tells Randak that he was told to bring Black Bolt's son here to make sure that everything goes well with his transition. Randak tells him not to worry. No matter what the child becomes, all Inhumans are his people. And Kang tells him, well, no, Ahura is his property. A deal was made, and once Ahura gets the aid and training that he needs, Kang will take him back. Randak tells him that this is his kingdom, and he will determine what happens. And Kang tells him that Ahura will eagerly leave once he's found out his heritage. But he can just ask Ahura himself. Soon after, he bursts out and climbs out of the cocoon in front of everyone. But as Ahura tries to understand what's going on, Kang tells him to hang on and he leaves to send Black Bolt, Reader, and Triton to 1961. We are back at the day that they all first arrived back in time. However, in the shadows of Attilan, the group returns to the same timeline as before, while Kang goes off to fight the original Black Bolt, Reader, and Triton. The future versions who have dealt with everything are now here to try and correct this again. Medusa goes to one of the townspeople to tell him that she is their queen in the future, and she needs to see the king of now. So after a short moment later, Medusa and everyone begins to walk towards Randak and Ahura runs to hug his mother. He then looks at Black Bolt and he tells him that he's pretty sure Medusa forced him to come. Triton tells Ahura to relax. Black Bolt has battled through the ages to get him to come back. And Ahura tells him it doesn't matter. He's here with Randak to learn his powers. And Triton tells him, we already know that. We already know what your power is. You can create psychic doubles and even possess people. Johnny speaks up and says, yeah, especially that last one. But Ahura says, why is he even here? This is a family affair. And Johnny just looks at him. But Ahura says that it doesn't matter. He's not going anywhere. He's going to stay with Kang. And that's when Medusa shows him the Historican and all of the things that he did as he grew up. And Ahura asks, why would Kang do all of that? That's when Kang appears behind them all to tell them, why indeed? It's simple, really. Betrayal. With that, Kang brings forth an army out of time. Everyone begins to fight off the soldiers and Ahura attempts to join the fight, but Kang grabs him from behind. As everyone finishes defeating the army, Black Bolt and Medusa walk to Kang, and Medusa tells him, release our child. And Kang tells him, or what? You can't do anything to me. So Black Bolt begins to open his mouth, and when he looks at Ahura, he closes it. Then, Ahura uses his power to create a phantom that turns and possesses Kang. Ahura tells him that even though his parents failed him many times, they are still his parents. But now Kang is also his toy. He then turns to Kang and he tells him to go fix everything that he's done to damage the Inhuman timeline. And if you ever feel the urge to harm the Inhumans again, kill yourself before you do it. And with that, Kang disappears. Ahura turns to everyone and then walks to Black Bolt and Medusa and tells them, let's go home. Now, if you're wondering who the Inhumans are, they are kind of like the X-Men, where they're born with this whole Inhuman gene in them, and then they have to be exposed to the Terrigen Mist, which puts them into a cocoon to get their powers. We do have a video on them, but if you really do enjoy the Inhumans, I'll start doing a bunch of background stories on the Inhumans themselves, and more stories like this. I wasn't a huge fan of the Inhumans, but this run of the Inhumans hooked me, and I'm loving every minute of it right now. Hope you guys did too. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Comicstorian and Instagram at Comicstorian, and I'll see you next time right here.